Hey everyone, it's me, Mir, again, and I'm back with another Street Fighter 6 video. This is about a very common situation in Street Fighter, and I'm sure it happened to all of you as well. You know, you go to knock down your opponent and then you try to pressure them and they wake up with a button and you get counter hit and really frustrated. And this is especially annoying for new players that don't know what to do. So today I'm going to try and teach you a very simple concept that will help you with these kind of buttonsy players, and you can punish them for mashing a wake up every time.
What are you waiting for?
These are meaty attacks, or sometimes just meaties, and you might have heard them before, especially in tournament commentary. It actually refers to a very simple concept. It's timing an attack with your opponent's wake up so that there is no gap for them to do anything about it, and they just get hit on wake up. And coincidentally, you can do this with throws as well. You see how Jamie gets counter hit, and this is the reason why Street Fighter 6 has throw loops in the corner. So you might be thinking to yourself, you know, that's fairly obvious, I gotta figure it out. But there's actually some nuance to this topic, which is what I want to discuss in this video. Oh, what's that? Oh, you wanna know why they're called meaties? Well, I'm glad you asked. So the concept of hitting someone before they can press on wake up is, you know, really simple. But how do you do it consistently? That's the real challenge. In Street Fighter 6, something that is important is that the wake up timing is the same for quick price and back price. So if you open the menu and you go to your dummy settings here, at the bottom you see recovery, and there's recovery in place or recover backwards, and you can put it to random. And as you can see, when I knock down my opponent, sometimes they will wake up in place, sometimes they will wake up backwards like that. And this is especially noticeable in the corner when they cannot really move anywhere by waking up backwards, and you'll see how the timing is actually consistent on both wake ups. So I get a counter hit there, that's another normal wake up, and you see I still got a counter hit. And what I'm doing there is that I'm using a visual cue that is consistent with every kind of wake up, whether it is in place or backwards, to time my attack so that it beats the opponent pressing a button as they're waking up. I think it's something important to practice because it is a situation that happens a lot in matches. However, this can only get you so far because at the end of the day you're still eyeballing the meaty. So the best way to do meaties is actually learning a basic setup so that you can make it consistent. I'm not gonna go too in depth on anything too complicated, but we're gonna look at some very basic setups in this video to understand the concept that I'm trying to describe here. So you see that I have the frame visualizer on. Now, if you do not understand frame data or you have a very simple grasp of it, the only thing that you really need to care about is that when you knock down an opponent, you'll see advantage, in this case in blue, advantage 20 frames. That means I can act before my opponent for, you know, that amount of frames. So this is what we're gonna use to create a setup. Now, in our case, I know that Ken's forward dash is 19 frames and we have an advantage of 20 frames. So what that means is that I can basically create a situation where I'm still at an advantage after dashing. So if you see right here, if I throw Jamie and dash forward, I'll be at +1 where it says advantage 1 frame, which means it's still my turn. Again, if you do not understand frame data, the important part is that the advantage stays in the blue, because if it goes in the red, like for example I can show here by mistiming it, you'll see that it's not my turn anymore. Okay, so now we have a basic setup where we are at an advantage. However, we're not that much at an advantage, it's only a single frame. So for this situation, we'll use our fastest normal, which is Crouching Light Punch. You'll see how if Jamie is waking up with his own normal, I'll always beat him as long as I do the setup correctly. So now I have Jamie here set up to do a Crouching Light Punch after waking up in place, as you see there. And you'll see that if I dash after the throw and press Crouching Light Punch, as long as I do the setup correctly, I will always counter hit him. Like that. So now that we figured out how to land the meaty, either by eyeballing the timing or using a simple setup so that it lands consistently, now we need to convert off of it to get our reward, which is basically doing a combo so that we can score some damage on the opponent. If you're a beginner, I would stick to some normal combos that work in every situation. So in the case of our throw here, I'll just do a normal Ken DMB, something like that. If you're waking up your opponent with a button, you know, you can do something else, like for example something like this, and this works even if you get a counter hit. It just works on natural hit as well. The only thing that you need to be careful of is that you don't want to do the full thing if the opponent is blocking, of course, because especially a combo like this that ends in a dragon punch, you don't want to get punished for it. If you're feeling a little bit more confident, you can go for a counter hit only combo. In Street Fighter 6, counter hit adds 2 frames to your advantage when you hit the opponent, so combos that are not possible normally are possible on counter hit. So in the case of Ken, you have standing medium punch into standing medium punch. That doesn't normally work, but if you do it on counter hit, you'll see how it actually connects properly. This is an important step to add to the optimization of combos and score more damage, and especially in a meaty situation where you're expected to get a counter hit, on an opponent that is mashing in particular, you can use that to your advantage to do more damage and maybe get better corner position. So as you can see right here, Meaty Attacks can be really good to stop wake up buttons and can potentially have better reward thanks to the counter hit. However, we can make them even more rewarding than that. Attacks in Street Fighter are active for a certain amount of frames. So for example, in the case of Ken's standing medium punch, you can see the frames in red in the frame visualizer. That's the active frames. This is how long the hitbox stays out, and basically what this means is how long the attack can actually hit the opponent before it starts recovering. Now, since people that are on the ground are invincible until they stand up, you can make it so that they wake up into the attack, and with the right timing, you can make it so that they wake up into the later frames of the attack, and that actually will give you more advantage both on hit and block, and I'll show you a couple of examples here. So you can see here that Ken's standing medium punch only has 4 frames of advantage on hit. However, if you time it correctly on someone's wake up, you'll see that it can be more than 4, in this case it's 5. And I have a setup here that can guarantee a meaty consistently. So you'll see that after I land my heavy Shoryuken, if I dash forward, I'm at plus 6 frames. But standing medium punch is only 5 frames of startup, which means that it will hit later in the active frames. And you'll see that when I do that, my standing medium punch is suddenly more plus, it's plus 6, which will be consistent as long as I execute my setup correctly. So in this situation, without any counter hit or anything like that, I can score the equivalent of a counter hit combo with my standing medium punch, even though that was just a natural hit. And this becomes even more noticeable if the opponent is pressing something on wake up, as the counter hit frames add on top of this. As I was mentioning, this advantage changes on block as well, so you'll notice that Ken's standing medium punch on block is -2. So if I do the same setup, you'll notice that all of a sudden it's 0 on block instead. Now another simple setup is off of Ken's sweep, which is particularly important because you cannot back rise a sweep. It's a hard knockdown, so you can do this setup even mid-screen, and it involves Ken's standing heavy punch. Now the standing heavy punch normally is only +3 on hit, which means I don't get any combo, but if I do it in the setup, you'll see how it is +6, which actually is enough for me to continue afterwards and get a combo. And again, this is particularly notable because normally the standing heavy punch, as you see here, is minus on block, it's -2, so I lose my turn. But if I set the opponent to block after the wake up, you'll see how using this setup actually turns into a plus move, so it's my turn still. I'm not particularly close to my opponent, but I can still use this to my advantage. This kind of meaty attack that hits active like that also beats certain attacks that might be invulnerable or have armor, but not on the first frame of the attack. So like in our case here, for example, Marisa's Skudum is not actually armored on the first frame. So if I do that setup from before, you'll see how Marisa actually gets counter hit. However, that is not the case for the OD version, which is in fact armored on frame 1. This kind of meaty attack that is active as I demonstrated right now is what originally meaty referred to. However, more recently it's been used in a more generic way to refer to any kind of attack that you do on your opponent's wake up. So one option that your opponent has to blow up a meaty is to do a reversal. So if I do something like this, you'll see that the super hits me as a punish counter and I couldn't have done anything about that, I just get hit. However, not all reversals are born equal, and some of them are very slow. This means that you actually can create some setups where you can safely apply meaties and still block in time. So let's look at Kimberly's level 1, for example, which has 12 frames of startup, which is kind of slow. If I do that setup from before, where I throw, dash forward, and press crushing light punch, you'll see that I get hit and I get punish counter, and I couldn't have blocked that. However, there are other setups where I'm more plus, where I can actually make it so that I can block this reversal, and I'll demonstrate another one right here. So I Kimberly set up to wake up with crushing light punch here, as you can see, and if I do run DP like this, dash and crushing light punch, you'll see that I am plus enough that I can stop her every time. But if she decides to wake up with a super instead, and I do the same setup, you'll see that I'm actually able to block in time, and then I can get a full combo punish on Kimberly's recovery. So this is a way of creating a setup that beats people that are mashing normal buttons, but also beats their slow reversals if they attempt to do any. Now I need to be careful, because if Kimberly has full meter and I do the same setup and I try to bait it out, you'll see that the level 3 actually punishes me because it is faster. It's only 8 frames of startup and I cannot make my jab safe. It's still something useful to know, especially because Kimberly doesn't have an OD reversal that she can use normally, so she only has access to these kind of like slower reversals. So this will help make your offense much safer and cover for multiple options at the same time. So now that we went over this, I mean, Meaties look amazing, right? You can stop people from mashing, you get a counter hit combo, you can even make them more rewarding by having them hit active. In some cases, you can even stop invincible reversals. So, I mean, why shouldn't you use them every time? Well, of course, there is counterplay, as I hinted at before. One example is invulnerable reversals. Only the slow ones have trouble against the Meaties. Most of them just beat them clean. And even then, if you do a slower Meaty with longer recovery, like a medium or a heavy, even the slow reversals will be able to beat you. So this is not really going to help with people that mash OD, DP, or super every wake up. Moves that have armor, especially the ones that have it on frame 1, are really good at blowing up Meaties, even the active kind, because of how armor works in this game. As you see, I couldn't block there. So Honda's OD Headbutt, for example, Marisa's OD Scutum are really good options in this case. The other obvious one is that the opponent can just block. And I mean, this is not a perfect solution, especially if it is a Meaty that makes the move more plus, or you have used a move that is plus naturally to do a Meaty. But combined with the delay tech option select, it's actually really difficult to open someone up by using throws or strikes as a Meaty because of this. So you'll have to change your strategy to adapt to this situation. And last but not least, another option here is to wake up with a perfect parry. Now, since Meaties hit with consistent timing, especially when you're doing them out of the setup, the opponent can also parry with consistent timing, so they can score a perfect parry every time if you're being, a little bit too careless. And they get a guaranteed punish counter pretty much in every situation, like for example a throw to throw you in the corner, or a combo. And even though the combos are very scaled, if they have super, they will still do a lot of damage because supers have a minimum amount of scaling. So there's actually some risk to do Meaties every time if the opponent is ready for them with a perfect parry. Even if they screw up the timing and wake up with a normal parry, they're still pushing you back a little bit, they're getting drive gauge back, so it's a fairly safe option to go for. Of course, in that situation, a throw will score a punish counter, so it's a little bit riskier than blocking, but still a legitimate option that you can use to beat Meaties. So I realized as I was editing this video that I actually didn't talk about drive impact basically at all. And the reason why that is, honestly, is because it's just not a good option against Meaty. You'll see even in the situation of using certain heavies and stuff, you do have time to DI back. So in the case of the Meaty standing heavy punch here, you see how much time I actually have to do my own drive impact back, and that will hit JP as he does his. If I do, for example, the throw setup where I dash forward and press a light, I have plenty of time to do what I want here. In fact, I could do even another normal and cancel that into my own DI. So in general, I would not advise using drive impact against Meaties unless you know that they're going for something that has really long recovery. But in general, there are much safer options as the ones that I've described before. I think this is good enough as an introduction to Meaties and simple setups. You can practice this in training mode and then bring them online. I'm sure it will help you a lot, especially in the lower ranks where people like to mash on Wakeup. pretty much every time. You can also use this to your advantage if you notice that people are doing meaties on you, as we described their weaknesses just a second ago, so you can use that to turn the tide in your advantage. Meaties are still very useful in higher ranks, in fact you see them all the time, so it's a good skill to master early. I hope you liked today's video. Of course, there are more guides and videos coming on our channel. We have a playlist full of guides for Street Fighter 6, and I highly suggest you check them out. If you like the content, subscribe, and I guess I'll just see you in the next one. Bye bye, have fun with Street Fighter 6, guys.